The country of Russia, from its personality to its size and from its extensive history, it is big. A country that some may fear, some ally, and most respect. However, in this video, we aren't going to look at the country as a whole, but instead look at a very specific aspect of the Russian armed forces. And that is the Russian Special Forces, and look at their history, their position, and their valor. There is a lot of Special Forces groups within the military of Russia. For example, there's the Alpha Group, which operates from the Federal Security Service, known as the FSB. There's also Airborne Special Forces under the VDV, and of course SOBR 1 and 2. There's also the National Guard, and many more. So for this video, I'm going to talk about some of these forces. I might leave a few out. Of course, I'm also going to talk about the history of the Special Forces and how they came to be. And before I get into the whole video, if you guys are liking this content and you want more content on Special Forces, hit that like button. And if you're new, hit the subscribe button. Now, the common name for special forces within Russia is Spetsnaz, which is an abbreviation for Войска Специального Назначения, basically meaning special military purpose units, roughly in translation. Now, as for history, this is where it gets very interesting and a little tough, because for some forces, they are rather modern. For example, the Special Operations Forces, known as the CCO, which I might also refer to as SOF. This particular unit falls under the Operational Forces Command, known as the KSO, and was recently formed in 2009. But the thing is, the term Special Forces and Spetsnaz and all that sort of stuff has existed long before this group was ever created, and has a history from well before the KGB. Because if we look at the KGB was basically kind of like the state security, and they had special forces units within it. However, the KGB was actually formed from 4 other units. You have Cheka, which is basically the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission that was formed from the old Soviet Union police units, and that was created on December 5th, 1917. As well, there was also the NKVD, which was the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. Now, the NKVD was also formed out of policing units, and they oversaw the country's prisons, labor camps, and were also a secret policing force that was formed in 1936. However, this group grew into what is known as the MVD, and I'm going to be using this term much throughout this video, because the MVD is the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which was created in 1946. As well, there was also the NKGB, which was a form of secret police and counterintelligence that was created on February 3rd, 1941. However, eventually, this unit evolved into what is known as the Military State Security, known as the MGB in 1946. However, the MGB was also classified as a secret policing force until about 1953. However, on March 13th of 1953, all these units were thrown in together and created the KGB, and this is where you get the birth of a lot of Spetsnaz. And I also want to mention, considering on this channel I talk a lot about special forces, Russia has a very different model of how the special forces came to be. Unlike most other countries where the special forces have evolved from the airborne troops, Russia's more or less came from these secret policing forces. However, I should also mention that Russia has a special forces group within the airborne, and on top of that, it's like the second largest airborne unit in the entire world. The entire airborne, or the paratroopers of Russia, are huge. And one of the reasons why this might not have evolved compared to other countries is because most of the airborne troopers during the Second World War were used more as foot soldiers, with only a handful ever being dropped anywhere during the Second World War. The Allies, however, used paratroopers for more specialized operations. But jumping back to the KGB, these guys were in charge of internal security, intelligence, and secret policing. For this group was present during quite a few operations internationally, such as the Soviet-Afghan War from 1979 to 1989, and in one particular operation known as Operation Storm-333, Russian forces, including the Spetsnaz at the time, seized the Tajbeg Palace and took out the Afghan president in 1979. Now, within the KGB at this time, there were 2 major Spetsnaz groups. There was the famous Alpha Group, as well as its sister group known as Spetsgruppe V or Spetsgruppe Wimpel. And these 2 units, believe it or not, are still active today. They survived the fall of the Soviet Union and are now under what is known as the FSB. Because for the KGB, it existed until the fall of the Soviet Union, in which it was replaced by what is known as the FSK, or the Federal Counterintelligence Service. and this group existed from 1991 until April 3rd of 1995, when it was renamed and replaced by what is now known as the FSB. However, let's keep in mind that not all special forces today fall under the FSB.
The nuclear weapons tests of the Soviet Union were performed between the years 1949 and 1990 as a part of the nuclear arms race. And the nuclear arms race was really an arms race competition to see who could be the top in terms of nuclear power between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, now Russia, and the United States own about 90% of the world's supply of nuclear weapons. Let's take a look into the brief history of Russia's nuclear tests. The Soviet Union had conducted 750 nuclear tests using 969 total devices, and this is only by the official count. And these tests included 219 atmospheric tests, as well as underwater tests, and 124 peaceful use tests. These tests were all conducted under the Soviet atomic bomb project that was a classified research and development program that was authorized by Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union. And this was all to develop nuclear weapons during the Second World War. So after Joseph Stalin heard about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan by the United States, well, the nuclear program swung into full gear. They went more aggressively, and this moved with great speed due to the intelligence that was gathered about the German nuclear project as well as America's Manhattan Project. On August 29th, 1949, the Soviet Union secretly conducted its first successful nuclear weapons test, which is called First Lightning, in Kazakhstan. And Russia's nuclear testings was even said to be more extreme than the United States test, because the effects continued to this day. And in 1949, Russia, then the Soviet Union, dropped atomic bombs in an area that is now known as Kazakhstan, and that area was called Semipalatinsk, aka the Polygon. Now the sad thing about this is that one of the nuclear program's architects said that this area was completely uninhabited before the tests started. However, that was not the case, because there were about 1.5 million people living in the area when the nuclear tests were conducted. For 40 years following that, the Soviets, they detonated bombs here, with tests at one point happening almost daily. So the effects of these nuclear testings in the Polygon became visible almost immediately, because cancer rates drastically increased, as well as the rates of birth defects and mental disabilities. Now I want to take a look at the Tsar Bomba. So the Tsar Bomba was the Western nickname for the Soviet RDS-220 hydrogen bomb that was codenamed Vanya, and this was detonated by the Soviet Union back on October 30th of 1961. And the Tsar Bomba is the largest nuclear device ever detonated and the most powerful man-made explosion in history. This has a yield of 50 megatons of TNT. The Tsar Bomba was a result of a number of hydrogen bomb tests that were conducted throughout this time by the Soviet Union as well as the United States. The Tsar Bomba weighed 27 tons, and that's about 59,525 pounds. And this thing was massive. It was 26 feet in length and 6.9 feet in diameter. And when they conducted the tests with the Tsar Bomba, it was attached to a parachute weighing nearly 1,800 pounds. The Tsar Bomba's yield was approximately 1,570 times more powerful than the yield of the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Russia's military is currently ranked second in the world, next to the United States of America. The total available manpower for Russia's military is 70 million. And there are a total of 766,055 active frontline personnel. On top of that, they have 2,485,000 active reserve personnel. A military reserve force is pretty much a military organization that comprises of people from a country who combine their military role with their personal careers. And their main role is pretty much to be available if any time the army has to mobilize and they have to go out and fight. In terms of the land systems, we gotta take a look at the tanks, the armored vehicles, and things like the rocket launcher systems. Russia's military has a total of 15,398 tanks, armored fighting vehicles total 31,298, and multiple launch rocket systems total 3,793. So now we take it from the land up to the sky. Total aircrafts for Russia is 3,547. 1,124 of those are transport aircrafts, and a growing fleet of attack helicopters and fixed-wing attack aircrafts. Now, we could talk about the frontline personnel, we can talk about the aircrafts and all the land military systems that Russia has. But of course, everything comes with a price, and the financials actually play just as important of a role in military combat as does an aircraft. Russia's total defense budget is $46.6 billion. Now, more recently than not, the Russian Federal Treasury did confirm that Russia's defense budget was cut by 25.5% for the year 2017. This reduction is Russia's biggest cut to their military budget since the early 1990s. This reduction follows a long period of time of large increases to Russia's defense spending, which grew by an average of 19.8% since the year 2011. But despite this cut, the 2017 budget remains about 14.4% higher. The Russian government had initially set out plans to reduce the defense expenditure in the draft of the 3-year budget for 2017 to 2019, and that was released on October 26, so we knew there was some sort of cut coming. But Russia has learned over the years how to mobilize their army a lot more efficiently, as well as focus on the most important aspects of their military. Lessons learned from experiences in Ukraine and Syria are also being integrated into Russia's military as it develops more and more. However, the Russian armed forces are still largely in an experimental phase. The modernization of Russia's military has yet to reach certain crucial parts of their military, but in some important areas like nuclear weapons, air defense, and long-range guided missiles, Russia has invested a lot of capital in those areas, and yeah, we see the results.